Testing 1, 2, 3. Hello, hello. Hey, everybody. Okay, we got it. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for hanging in there. It has been a tech issue morning, and I am just happy that we have made it and we are here. This is Skeptic Generation. I'm your host, Eric Murphy. It is April 27th, 2025, Season 4, Episode 16. My cat really, there we go, sweetie. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. All right, just making sure that we are good. It looks like I'm coming in a little bit quiet, so let me just adjust this, up my gain a little bit. Testing 1, 2, testing 1, 2, 3. All right, I think that's better. Okay, hopefully that's fixed. One last time for the road. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is Skeptic Generation. I'm Eric Murphy, and we need to talk. It is April 27th, 2023. It is Season 4, Episode 16. Thank you so much for joining me. I do have a co-host on today. It's Dean Meadows. Dean is a Christian apologist, and he really, truly believes in the resurrection. He really, truly believes that someone can rise from the dead, and he wants to talk about it. Now, before I bring him in, I kind of want to talk about this a little bit, because I think that it can be very easy for someone to say, Eric, how come you didn't call him out on X, Y, and Z? But this is a call-in show, right? You're not tuning in necessarily to see a debate between the two of us. You're watching people call in so that they can have that opportunity, because not everybody gets the opportunity to talk to an actual Christian apologist, right? Not just somebody who believes, but somebody who spends that time and has trained on defending the faith. And so this is that chance for you to call in. So let me get a couple basic things out before we get started. If you like the show, if you're new, hit that like button, hit subscribe. Please, every little bit helps. I'm going to put the phone number out, and then we'll hop into our first caller. We're going to give Dean just a little bit, just a minute. He needed to step away. With that said, here is the phone number. Our call screener is waiting to talk to you. It is 412-SKEPGEN. That's 412-753-7436. Or you can go to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. That's tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. Like I said, our call screener, who today is Secular Rarity, is waiting to talk to you. One more thing that's actually really big. 2 of the volunteers for this show are celebrating their birthdays this weekend. Excuse me, Caitlin and Kristen, happy birthday from all of us. Thank you so much for the time and honestly, like the years that you've put into helping make this show happen. From the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate it. And I know that everybody in the crew appreciates you. So thank you. And I hope you both have wonderful birthdays this weekend. All right. So yeah, while I wait until Dean is back, let's just hop into our first call. Kina in Washington.
Oh, hello.
Hello. You called early, and I'm so appreciative of it. And looking at your topic, I'm definitely glad that you and I get to talk first. So, what's going on?
So last week, I think it was you posed a conundrum to Atticus, or maybe it was the other way around, where it was like, it seems like with what Christians say they believe, the natural conclusion should be that they should be doing some very like inquisition-y stuff to make sure that they convert as many people as possible and prevent as many deconversions as possible, which, obviously is the behavior we really want, which is, again, kind of a conundrum, right? Like it seems like if they had the integrity we respect, they would be taking actions we don't respect.
Why? Why do you think that that would be an integrity thing for them? Like what's informing that choice or that opinion?
Well, it seems like it's the logical outcome, right? When you're dealing with eternity is on either side, right?
Mhm.
Sorry, I may have misunderstood. Am I misremembering the how you phrased that to Atticus?
No, no. I honestly, I don't remember at the moment. I just came
Oh,
off of trying to fix like 10 tech issues that happened at 1 minute to show.
oh no.
And so I am just like still dialing in. Um, but okay. So you want to see if you can steel man the Christian position
Mhm.
that hell is on the line
Right.
and that
And also heaven, right? Because a typical Christian believes that Christian that heaven is as good as hell is bad. So like, not only is it infinitely bad for someone to go to hell, but it's also infinitely bad for them to not make it to heaven. So
okay. Okay. So I gotta admit, like I saw in the description, if Christians had more integrity, and I was worrying that you were maybe creating a straw man. You know what I mean? Uh,
no, I
that
actually
that
I
that follows.
I think there's more integrity than it looks like,
Okay.
uh,
Yeah.
because on a surface level, like because you're actually not the first atheist I've heard make that remark, right? As it seems like there's a there's a weird disconnect there.
Yeah.
Um, and honestly, until I stopped to think about it, I was thinking that too, right? But then I stopped. What it occurred to me that I feel like generally, like in almost every case, the first step to solving a problem is to understand the problem you're trying to solve, right?
Hmm.
And so the first thing that a Christian should do to solve an infinitely important problem is to take the act of understanding it infinitely important, right?
Yeah.
Which means that shouldn't, they shouldn't get to the doing crazy things step until they truly understand it. Um,
Yeah.
so if it's something that can't be understood, right? If it's especially if they have like their own doubts that they're struggling with, right? Then it would be irresponsible for them to ever get to that stage. So actually, it is a mark of integrity that they never get that far because they're taking that first step more seriously. Whereas all the people who do, like the fundamentalists, the evangelicals who do take the proselytization more seriously,
Hmm.
it represents an inability to take the process of understanding seriously. So I actually think the more I think about it, the more I think I actually respect Christians who don't proselytize more,
Well,
simply because I'm realizing that their priorities are a little bit closer to what I would expect than I'd realized.
well,
Yeah.
so I'll give you a couple of tools because Dean's not back yet, and my punishment for him is that he gets to have a more prepared caller. I am going to stay out of the way though. That way, we're not, piling on. But what you're referencing is called the Great Commission, and in the book of Matthew 28, it says, let me just read here. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded. And surely I am with you always at the very end of the age. So there is definitely a direct commandment by Jesus to go and proselytize. And I think that really is interesting because, yeah, no, I think, so just as a tangent, because we're settling in, Dean's going to be here in a minute, I think. Um, the first time I dealt with infinites when it comes to morality, like it really does skew in a really, really interesting way. And I think you're right. Yeah, as soon as you get to an infinite, it is going to do wacky moral things. The very first time I thought about that, I was a teenager and I was thinking about, X-Men or something like that. And if somebody had the power to heal with the touch, if you could heal any disease or any affliction by touching them, then the moral thing to do is be in a hospital healing people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then things like sleeping become a moral question because you're weighing your sleep versus healing the dying, you know? And, you know, you're weighing how much time it takes to go to the restroom. But for as long as you are alive, to not be using that power could arguably, for any reason, be infinitely immoral. And so, similarly, yeah, if infinite, you know, heaven or infinite hell are on the line, then to what degree should someone proselytize when it sounds like it would be infinitely immoral not to? You know? Is that a decent way to describe your position?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the point at which you feel like you are confident that you could get confident that you understand the situation and confident you can get the result you want, then yeah, it makes complete sense that you'd go into those very dark places. Or at least to me, they seem dark, right? Like, you know, obviously healing everyone 24/7 is a good thing for the person being healed, but it's pretty grueling for the person doing the healing, right? So it's, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I don't know. And then again, just because we're taking this a little bit, and I'm happy to fill the time. If you don't have an infinite ability, right? So like, you know, a human cannot. I don't know. I'm interested in how a Christian would interact as a human, right? Not recognizing that even though the stakes are infinite, their impact on that stakes is minuscule, you know,
Yeah.
vanishingly
Yeah,
small
you
in
know,
comparison.
oh,
Go ahead.
yeah, I think that's the other problem that comes into having imperfect understanding is because even if you know what needs to be done perfectly, if you do not perfectly understand how to reach that result, you risk making things worse instead of better.
Kina, I can tell that you were a Christian because I've never heard somebody raised not Christian use the term perfect understanding.
Yeah, yeah. I think normally I'd use perfect knowledge because that's the game theory term. But yeah, yeah. I think you're correct.
Right? Right? Like outside of the religious context, perfect understanding is a weird term. It is a very weird
Yes.
term. It's definitely part of that baggage that we don't always get through on the other side. All right, Kina, I think you're locked and loaded. You're ready to go. So I'm going to pop you back into the queue. And I think I am going to, if Dean's not back soon, I'm going to lose it. Kina, stay tuned. He'll be here shortly.
Will do.
All right. And then, because you're going to keep me company while I get you dialed into the lower third, Atheopagan, what's good?
Oh God! Oh, I was not ready. Okay, hi. How you doing?
Caught you with your pants down. Doing good. How about you?
How'd you know? How did you know?
I'm watching. Oh,
Oh, okay. Oh no, it's Dean. Actually, it's the Mandalorian. It's Boba Fett.
there
Boba
he
Fett
is.
standing
Perfect
right behind me.
timing. Oh no. All right, fine. Atheopagan, I'm going to kick you back so I can introduce Dean, and we'll be with you shortly.
Send me back to the void.
Back to the void you go. Dean, what's good, brother? He is coming in and getting ready. Hello, hello. Dean, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Hey,
What's up, dude?
you're live.
Nice. That's great.
Hey, everybody. This is Dean Meadows. Dean, Christian apologist. Before we kind of dive in, I know that you've been on once before, but just for the people who weren't there last episode, who are you?
I am Dean Meadows. I work as a campus minister at Virginia Tech. I have a background, a master's in Christian apologetics, served some time in the Marine Corps, and I thoroughly enjoy conversations like this. Actually, I'll you know, give you your flowers. Eric is one of my best friends in the world, even though he lives all the way across the country. And I just enjoy having these conversations about faith. So yeah, that's me.
Cheers. I love you too, man. I, you know, that was a topic that we had that got in my mind, that whole loving somebody, or that Christian, like, oh no, I love you even though I don't know you kind of thing. It's very different
Mhm.
when somebody earns it, you know?
Yeah, no doubt.
All right. Well, then let's not gild the lily. You got callers. You got
Okay,
callers. This is going to
I
be
got a
you.
caller.
And because of it, I'm going to try and stay out. I want them to have their time with you and not me. So, but I'll try my
Okay.
best. I know I wasn't great last time.
Oh, I got you.
All right. Do you want to talk to
Um,
one of them in particular, or do you want me to just grab one?
yeah, just yeah, grab one. Go
All
for it.
right. Well, we were talking to Kina just before you joined. So let's
Yeah,
talk to
well, let's
Kina
stay
in
there.
Washington.
Hi, I cannot hear Dean over Colin's studio.
Oh, you can't. Oh my.
What?
Okay. Let me see here. Utility buses. Let me check the buses here. And Dean, can you say something for me?
Yes, Jesus rose from the grave.
All right. I think you should be able to hear Dean now. Kina, can you two hear each other now?
I can hear
I didn't hear anything.
Dean, say something for me.
I can hear Kina for sure.
All right. And Kina, you
Uh
cannot.
oh.
Oh, echo. Is there still an echo? See,
No, I
this
said
is.
uh
Oh.
oh.
Okay. You cannot hear Dean. Oh. Okay.
Eric, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay.
So this is what's going to happen. We're going to do a little bit of troubleshooting, and Kina, you're going to help us, okay?
Sounds great.
Okay.
All right. So let's see here. I got this. You shouldn't have an echo. If it's going out on all buses, then okay. Dean, say something for me.
Yes, my name is Dean, and I'm on Eric's show.
Anything?
nothing.
Anything, Kina?
Still nothing.
All right. Hold on. I'm going to pop you back in the queue.
Okay.
Dean,
Yeah.
since I'm going to take a second to try and make this adjustment.
Sure.
We have the topic of resurrection. So
Sure.
while I dial this in, do you want to give kind of a bit of a overview for the people who don't agree with you, your view on the resurrection, or any arguments that you want to make?
Yeah. So, I guess the first place that I'll start off with the resurrection is that I want to kind of let's cancel out some misnomers about why at least I specifically don't believe in um I don't believe in
An
I don't
interfaith.
believe the resurrection. Why some people might do it. Some people believe in the resurrection um, because that's just kind of the way that they grew up. That would not be me. Some people believe in the resurrection because they went to church one time and they got a warm and fuzzy feeling. That would not be me. I'm also not a product of the um, church camp experience equals transformed life and Christianity is true. That would not be me. I'd also say that
Hold
I don't
on.
believe that the resurrection is true because of some mission trip that happened when I was younger, or because of some church service project that happened.
That is one thing
Uh,
that I really appreciate. Is I feel like a lot of Christians don't realize that testimonials are for other Christians, and they think that
Right.
their testimonial is going to be the thing that convinces a non-believer, when it is absolutely for other Christians. You know, it is a time to share your experiences together and affirm each other in a way. But like, yeah, if you were to just hop on and share your testimonial, like some apologists I've spoken to, it would not be very useful for sure. Kina, I think, can hear you now. Kina,
I can.
All right, I'm going to leave you two to it.
Cool. So, what's your question, Kina?
So last week, Eric posed a conundrum to the co-host that week, that it seems like there's well, again, weird conundrum. It's that when you're dealing with infinites on either side, right? Infinite heaven on one side, infinite hell on the other, then it seems like, you know, if you truly believe that, then you would do absolutely everything within your power at all times of the day to make sure that as many people go to heaven as possible and as few people go to hell as possible, right?
Sure.
Which, you know, I mean, that's the Inquisition, right? So, like, we don't actually want people to be doing this. And so it's just kind of...
We don't want people to actually...
Weird problem where it seems...
We don't want people to actually do what?
The Inquisition stuff.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, no. I'm not for Inquisition.
You are coming in a little low, Dean.
Yeah.
Is there any way to turn up your gain?
How is that?
Which
a little
one?
more if you can.
How's that?
Much better. Okay, go on. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it's this weird thing where it seems like if Christians had, like it seems like a Christian with integrity should be doing things that you wouldn't generally associate with integrity. But then it occurred to me that like typically the first step to solving a problem is to understand the problem, right? So
Sure.
You would only resort to crazy things if you understood the problem in its entirety. And so I think it's actually, it's a mark of integrity, people who don't proselytize, in my opinion, because it means that they're still struggling with the issue struggling with the reality of what is within their power to do. And I'm curious what your opinion on that is. Like, do you think it shows integrity to not proselytize when you do not have sufficient knowledge to know you're doing the right thing?
So I guess my question would be first, what do you mean by sufficient knowledge? Would be my first question.
So it's a little
that'll help me.
right?
That'll help me answer the question.
Sorry.
No, I'm just saying, could you define that for me so it can help me answer your question?
Right. So I think it's a little subjective. I think it has to do with just that individual. Like, what do I think the costs are for doing this? What do I think the potential downsides are if I fail? How much time and effort do I have to give? Does it make sense to do this now rather than understand the problem better, and so on? Like, it's not, it's a fuzzy word for a fuzzy situation.
Sure. I see. I think I see what you're saying. I would say, that if Christianity is true, then it would be wrong to not talk to people about the resurrected Christ, right? So that's why I think that what you're basing sufficient knowledge on kind of is the crux of the conversation, because if you just simply, I think there's three ways to look at this particular issue, which would be one, I start out, I presuppose that supernatural things don't happen. I presuppose that supernatural things do happen, or I'm left to investigate them openly, honestly, on a case by case basis. Now, I try to do the middle, or the last one. I try to take things on a case by case basis. So if Jesus did rise from the grave and Christianity is true and he is who he says, or at least what Christians claim him to be, then it seems to me the wrong thing to do would be not to listen what he asks his followers to do, right? So I know that's starting with a lot of things, but as a Christian, I think that Jesus did rise from the grave. And so when he says, go into all the world and make disciples, then it would be wrong for me to not do that.
Right, but so that's part of what I was talking about with sufficiency, because like if you're saying that as someone who is wholeheartedly 100% convinced, yes, this is the truth, then that makes sense. But I feel like most Christians are not wholeheartedly 100% convinced, right? Like, how many Christians struggle with doubt? Like, when I was a Christian, it felt like every third sermon was about how to handle doubt. Like, if this is clearly a widespread phenomenon, and I grew up in a very conservative part of the Midwest, right? Like,
Sure.
There's more conservative places, there's more Christian places, but like these are not like, like, I don't think there was anyone in my church that really would have been keen to sit down and talk philosophy for me outside the context of religion, right? Like, not to try to be too insulting, but like these were not people who think deeply, right? They feel and then they act, right?
Sure.
And even in that case, which is the best case for being confident, they were still not wholly confident. So knowing that so many Christians are not completely confident, does that change your answer?
Well, no, I don't know of too many things that I have 100% confidence or knowledge about, right? So I would say that that'd be the case for you as well, right? You're not 100% confident that the foundational particles of the universe aren't just going to rip apart in the next 10 seconds and we're all going to be vaporized, do you? You don't have 100% confidence in that, do you?
I don't think that's comparable.
No, I'm not saying that it's comparable. I'm simply saying that you can tell somebody or you can inform somebody about what you believe to be true, even if you don't have 100% confidence or 100% knowledge about a particular thing, right?
Again, though, part of why I use the word sufficient is, and when I was trying to explain, what I meant by sufficient was I was talking about the costs of it and the consequences of failing, right? If I'm not completely confident in the situation, right? Like if I'm not confident that this chair will hold me up, which frankly I'm not most days, the worst consequence that I will sit down and the chair will fall apart, and that will suck, but it's not that big of a deal. So I don't really, it's a waste of mental effort to worry about it.
Can I jump in really quick? I feel like there's an assumption kind of built into what you're saying that I want to explore just a little bit. So when you started this out, you were saying that if the charge for if somebody does not believe, or if somebody does not come to Christ or during their lifetimes, they risk going to hell, right? And if they do, give their life to Christ, they go to heaven. And so with infinite consequences, that means that it would be morally reprehensible not to be proselytizing 24/7, right? When you said the Inquisition, I think it might be more like the Crusades, right? Deus vult, God wills it. If anything to prevent people from going to hell, even if it means we're going to threaten their lives, if infinite heaven and infinite hell are on the line, right? That's kind of the piece that I got from both of you, at the beginning of this. And it sounds like you think that the only reason Christians aren't doing it is because they're not entirely confident in the proposition. And I don't know if you asked Dean if that's the case.
Yeah, I was trying to get at it. Maybe I danced around it more than I thought I was.
No worries. So Dean, is the only reason Christians aren't doing an inquisition is because they're not confident in their belief, or?
No, I don't think that I wouldn't support inquisitions
Or crusades?
Yeah, or I actually don't support militaristic crusades in the name of Christianity either. So
Why not?
So why not?
Why not? Do you want people to go to hell? Think of all the Muslims in the Middle East who are going to hell.
Okay, let me phrase this more specifically with regards to what I said. I meant militaristic crusades, as in like what happened,
Right.
when Catholics invaded the Holy Lands back in the day. I'm not for that. I think the biggest difference between, at least in the first century, when Christianity was born, it was not born based upon the sword. It was born based upon engaging people where they are, Acts 17, and reasoning
but it got
with
around
them
the world
from
by the sword.
Do what?
It got around the world by the sword. Christianity was a small cult until Constantine made it the state religion of arguably the most powerful nation in the world at the time. And that's why it's everywhere now. If you look, like the places where Christianity does not have much influence today, is the places where Rome didn't have much influence back in the day.
So I'll just say this, and we can kind of move down the line here. I think, because I don't want to chase too many rabbits, I'll just answer the original question. Is that I don't think, at least as you read the text of Scripture, when Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you the King of the Jews?" Jesus said, "Yes, but his kingdom was not of this world before, because if it were of this world, his people would already be fighting." I do not believe in conversion by the sword, regardless of the form that it may take, whether that somebody utilizes it as a state religion or it's a part of a Holy Roman Empire. You will never find me on that train. Do things happen that take place within a religion that isn't is unfortunate with regards to the way particular people act and utilize religion? Sure, that happens across the board, but I would say it's grassroots effort in the first century. In the first century, Christianity is not a violent religion. And I also think, to the point about Constantine, whether that's true or not, doesn't do anything to disprove that early on in the Christian movement, that it was radically transforming a multitude of Jewish communities place by place without state sponsorship. I mean, you see that early on in Jerusalem at the epicenter of Judaism.
I mean, I think the historical record is clear, but setting that aside, the first thing you went for was going to the words of Jesus. And as far as the word of Jesus go, did Jesus say that he came not to bring peace but a sword? Did he tell people to sell their jackets and buy swords?
Sure. I think there's a difference between actively going and murdering people for conversion as a mode of saying, as opposed to saying, go and have a defense mechanism in case someone tries to kill you. I think, plus the text about bringing a sword is a mark, as a symbol of division. As he later goes on and he talks about this particular thing, he says that he is, based upon his preaching and the gospel, there will be divisions amongst family members, that there'll be 3 verse 2 and 2 verse 3, and then father against son and mother against daughter, because his teaching will be divisive.
So you use the passive voice there, but
Sure.
Jesus didn't use the passive voice. He used the active voice. He said, I am bringing division. I will turn brother against brother, father against son.
Sure.
Right? This is not a passive defense thing he's saying. He's saying, I am bringing division. You will need to arm yourself. That doesn't sound like meek to me. And this is the same person that ransacked the temple when they disagreed with him.
Yeah, he flipped over tables, but he didn't kill anybody. Right? Like he's the same. This is the same person. So you have to take into what you have to look at what Jesus says holistically, not just one passage separate and apart from the rest of the passages. He's also the one who, in the Garden of Gethsemane, when Peter takes his sword and lops off the ear of Malchus, the high priest's servant, looks at Peter and says, sheath your sword, because those who live by the sword will die by the sword. So if he says, live by the sword, die by the sword, but then in another passage he says, I come to not bring peace but a sword, there has to be a way to reconcile those passages without simply saying, oh, well, Jesus was some bloodthirsty cult leader, right? I don't believe that he was. I think when you look at what Jesus says, things like the Sermon on the Mount, they're some of the most transformative texts that actually lead and guide people towards peace, rather than, hey, let's just go start a war. I mean, I don't know of, and I have to look at the history of the first two or three centuries. I don't see in the first 2 or 3 centuries Christians just out and out just holding Jews and Gentiles by the sword, saying convert or die. That's another religion.
I mean, whether they did or didn't is kind of, because we're talking about the Bible more so right now than what actually happened. Like, I mean, we've apparently already set the historical record aside.
I thought we were originally talking about like sufficient evidence for like 100% conviction and conversion. I thought this was the original question.
Correct. You said that your primary reason for being confident enough to proselytize was because you trusted the words of Jesus. And my goal here really honestly wasn't more so to show that Jesus definitely wants combat. It's to show that his words are not nearly as clear cut as you make them out to be. If all you have is the Bible, you don't know for sure. Maybe you know for sure what you're supposed to do. You do not know how, and you could potentially cause more damage, more harm than good, by doing the right thing the wrong way.
Well,
I think it shows integrity when someone acknowledges that.
So, no, I think one of the ways that you could see how I'm supposed to communicate people the gospel is to look at the holistic approach of what the early church did in Acts. I'm saying from a Christian standpoint, from Acts, look at the gospels and the way that Jesus engaged with people. Jesus was ridiculed for hanging out with tax collectors and sinners, even within the 12 people that he chose to be his disciples. There's a conglomerate of different backgrounds. There's a conglomerate of different occupations. There's a different background of different upbringings. I mean, in one sense, you've got the zealot, who is what you would say the far right guy that wants to kill Romans, but then you've got a Jewish tax collector that's also there. Those two dudes in the first century just don't jive together, yet they're in this particular group for a particular reason. You also have women that are allowed to be disciples, which in the first century, no rabbi would allow a woman to be a disciple or a student. So I look at something like Acts chapter. One second.
Yeah.
I look at something like Acts chapter 2. You have plethora of people from across the empire that come to Jerusalem that speak different languages. And the sermon there that Peter gives in Acts chapter 2, obviously assuming that this happened from a Christian worldview, he doesn't say to them, convert or you're all going to be killed, or that we're just going to kill you all. He simply lays out a case for the resurrection, and people respond the way that they respond. Same thing happens in Acts chapter 17 with Paul. There's no instance in the early origins of Christianity in the first century that we can see that scholars agree with regards to the writings of Paul, that Christians were a violent group going around trying to convert people by the sword. And that's just where I look at, hold up, let me finish real quick. That's just where I look at my own life and I say, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do. Now, how I'm supposed to do it. Here's the example that I see, given the record of Acts and the Gospels. Go ahead. Thanks for letting me finish.
Yeah, so I feel like every time I talk about the Bible, you pivot to history, and every time I talk about history, you pivot to the Bible.
Well, I'm simply saying I'm assuming as a Christian that Acts is a record of history. I'm assuming that the things that Jesus said in the Gospels are records of history. You could look even early church fathers prior to Constantine.
Okay, but they're not.
Being the emperor, prior to Constantine being the emperor, you can see that there's a guys like
Eric's
John
been wanting to say something.
Chrysostom is a pacifist. Yeah, so I mean, you can look at that and see that.
Let me just dive in real quick. It's been 45 minutes. We should probably move on. We got a couple other callers, so I want to give you both a chance to kind of wrap up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, me first? Yeah. Well, basically, how do I even say this? I feel like there is a principled stance that Dean is taking to not engage in violence, that he has for reasons outside of his text, but he is reading those principles into the text so that he can be as confident in those principles as he is in the text, so that he can continue doing the right thing, morally speaking, and the right thing by his religion.
Dean, anything to respond?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I'm necessarily doing that. I'm going off of things like Matthew chapter 5:9. Blessed are the peacemakers, because they'll be called sons of God. I mean, that's right out of the text. I don't know how you interpret that any other way than God will approve of the people who are the peacemakers, and he'll call them theirs. So we can agree to disagree, and I really hope that the next time that I'm on the pod that you call so we can continue this discussion. It's a fascinating discussion. I really do thank you for waiting for me to get on to have a dialogue. I appreciate your patience in that, and two, I really appreciate the question and the conversation.
Sure. Yeah, I look forward to a conversation again sometime.
All right. Thank you for calling, Kina.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So before we hop into the next call, I have a couple thoughts here. I didn't want to be the person, I didn't want you to gang up on you, but I actually kind of agree with Kina on this.
In what way?
Well, so your example of Paul not being violent is great and very specific to Paul, because if you look at Simon the Zealot, the Zealot movement was very violent. And so to use Paul as an exemplar and yet just leave out the parts where they were being violent in your example of them not being violent feels disingenuous, and then on top of that, they were not incentivized to have the Great Commission before Christ. So his apostles wouldn't necessarily have that big of a stake in converting people. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the light, and none shall get to the Father but through me. That commission didn't come until after Jesus came into the picture. And so it is not a Judeo-Christian thing. The Great Commission is a Christian thing. And that Christian thing, if it is infinitely important that people not go to hell, then wouldn't it justify any atrocity if to prevent them from going there? Like, why would I care if I killed 1,000 people if at least all those 1,000 people got to go to hell? The life is but a blink of an eye compared to eternity. Send them all to heaven.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So one, I agree with you about the zealot movement. It was pretty wild. That was primarily a Jewish movement, but there's no record of Simon the Zealot committing atrocities while he's under the discipleship of Jesus. So I agree that there's a guy who's a part of a movement who's like, let's go kill Romans, but once he is with Jesus, there's no, I don't know of a historical record that would that shows that Simon the Zealot, while he was with Jesus, was still killing Romans.
Sure.
So that'd be my point. As far as like the atrocities with regards to sending people to heaven, that's one of the wildest things. Not that it's that
it is wild.
It's one of the wildest things that I've heard. Like, hey, let's go and commit atrocities so people can go to heaven. I mean, I would just say I think that the Christian who takes the Sermon on the Mount and looks at it, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are the meek or the humble. That there's a particular disposition and attitude towards other people that Jesus himself displayed, but also requires of his disciples. Which, I mean, you think about it. How would Christianity be distinguished from the Jewish zealots if they did the same things that the Jewish zealots did? I think that's one of the points of why Jesus says what he says about the way that you treat people, the way that you build peace, the way that you are humble. I mean, Philippians chapter 2 says, don't do anything out of selfish desire, but humble yourself and consider other people's desires more important than yours. And so as we engage with people, it's not like, I mean, it's not like Eric, I'm gonna shoot you in the face with a 9mm if you don't become a Christian, yes or no, and then as soon as you say yes, me shoot you in the head. Like that I think that's just counterproductive to what Christ calls me as a follower to do.
I mean, look, I as a thought experiment, it is infinite. You know what I mean? And I have seen and heard crazier things when it comes to that stuff.
No, I got you.
Yeah,
I got you. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, remind me to tell you about the suicide by baby murder at some point later. It was nuts. There have been some interesting times in the faith.
I'm gonna get PTSD from those stories.
It was the oldie times for sure.
Right.
But as much as I want to continue, we have got other callers, and I know that SKEPGEN has been chomping at the bit to talk to you. So SKEPGEN,
sure.
You're on you are loud, my friend.
Word.
Gotta get my bit out of my mouth. Give me a second.
Oh man!
Oh my word.
What's good, my man?
How you doing? So, Dean,
what's up, man?
Discussed the engagement of my hypothesis that God does not think that he is the only God last time, and you said that there was some stuff that you wanted to look at. I'm not going to presume you did because I know you're a busy man, but I just wanted to ask if there was anything after our last conversation that you wish to say before I go into a new topic of discussion. It's in the same vein. It's just that
yeah. So this is new. Admittedly, when you called last time, that was admittedly new territory for me. I never really heard someone say, "Well, God doesn't think that he's the only God that exists." And currently, I'm working on this theory of the divine council theory that I'm looking through that says that there's this God is the supreme God, and this is just a rough shot of this because I'm new to it. That God is the supreme God, but there's also this divine council of other gods that actually do exist. And so I'm working through that. I personally don't have at this point in time like a working knowledge of the intricacies of that. I'm just reading books right now, man. And so I actually appreciate you bringing that up, because if you hadn't brought that up, I wouldn't be doing this new study, and I appreciate that.
So I think, interestingly enough, I think Mormons kind of believe the same thing, that there are multitudes of gods that are kind of on this, that exist tertiary to God himself, who is the supreme God, or at least claims to be. But one of the other things that I found that would be interesting for you to look at to kind of counteract this idea that God is the supreme above all, if this is the trek that you want to go down, is specifically Kings 3. Do you know 2 Kings 3?
Not off the top of my head. No.
Okay. So the basic story and premise is this. Moab, which was a vassal state of Israel, decides they no longer wish to be a vassal state of Israel. So they break off from the vassalage and declare themselves free from Israeli control. The Israelis, of course, decide that they need to bring Moab back into the fold, so they invade. During the war, right before the war, I think that there is an engagement of one of the prophets of the Israelis beseeching God for assistance in this matter, and the prophet comes back to the king at the time and says, yes, God says, if you invade Moab, it will become yours once again. So the Israelis go out and they win over and over and over again up until they get to the Moab capital city, at which point the king of Moab, now me and Eric had a conversation before. He seems to think that the god that Moab worshipped is Baal, but I believe it's a different god named Chemosh. But that's beside the point. As the Israelis are sieging the city of Moab, the king, in a very desperate measure, sacrifices his oldest son to his god Chemosh. And after that occurs, now depending on which version of the Bible you read, it changes dramatically, this line of what happens. In some Bibles, it says that there is indignation, basically saying that the Moabs got very angry at the Israelis and drove them out. However, in the original Hebrew text, from my understanding, it says divine wrath. So the Moab king sacrifices his son, and divine wrath goes over the Israelis to the point where they are driven from the lands of Moab. Now, I don't know which direction you want to take this in terms of, do you want to take it in the term that God is the only God, which then you have a problem of why does God, if he is the only one that can make divine wrath, drive the Israelis out of Moab? If you want to go to the other route where you're saying that God is one God amongst many, but is the supreme, then why did he allow his people to get wiped by another God?
No, I think that's a really interesting conundrum. So yeah, I mean, I have no problem saying I've got no answer either way on that. I mean, I guess the only shot in the dark that I would take on that would be, you said there's depending on which version of the Bible you have, it's divine wrath, and what's the other one?
So if you take it, like I think the King James puts in indignation rather than divine wrath, but in the original Hebrew it was divine wrath.
Yeah, man. Great question. I got nothing on that right now. I think that's definitely an interesting take. I mean, there may be. I have to look at the text and dive into that. And yeah, dude, like, great question.
Yeah, I mean, what are your current, like, you did a little bit of an explanation of where you're going with this. It sounds like you're becoming pantheist a little bit. What
I don't know
is
that I'm a
your
pantheist.
okay? Continue. That's fine.
No, I'm just saying I don't know that I'm a pantheist. So yeah, I mean, I have no idea where to go with that. Just because that's just yeah, I've never heard that before in my life. But I'm glad that you brought it up. Now my gears are going to be turning the rest of the day. I'm going straight home after this and
Look up Moab.
going right to 2 Kings, 3 and deciphering all that. So I'm sorry I can't give you more. I just have a standing principle that if I don't know, I just say I don't know. And I know it's not entertaining, but
no, I'm gonna congratulate you on that because there are a lot of Christians this is brought up to where they're just like, no, this it's misinterpreted, or it's the God is the only God, and they don't actually engage with what the text is saying. So I'm going to say thank you for at least engaging with it that way. I do think that there is. Again, my whole reading of the Old Testament does seem to be the idea that God is kind of railing against the idea that he doesn't have supreme power, and he's fighting against other gods in order to achieve it. There is, during that time, even the Jews believed that different gods had different domains, and that different gods had not only like divine domains of death and war and all that, but also they had their geographical domains, that once a god left or a people of a god left their geographical zone, their god no longer had power or less power than they did in their own, which is interesting as well. It kind of gets into the D&D idea of like, a god's power is only limited to how many people believe in the divine power of that god. But yeah,
we're getting into like Clash of Titans stuff.
Yeah,
remake.
the only problem with that then is that basically if enough people believe you to be a god, you become one. So, but that's a different topic.
Yeah. So my answer is I don't know.
Yeah. Dean,
next time sorry, Eric. Next time, I need to get, I don't know, Eric, if we could get Atheopagan's information. That way, between now and the next time that I'm on, I can actually dive into this and kind of give him some type of answer before.
And rob the audience of the chance to get the answer at the same time?
True.
Oh, fair enough. That's fair enough. So
we want to know.
No,
don't kick us out for the good part.
Right.
Hey, Atheopagan.
Yo.
I love that you gave Dean something to check out, and I'd be really, really interested in what.
Yeah, great question, man. Amazing question.
Thank you. And if I would like to hear Eric's thoughts on this after I get kicked back into the void, because I think that he also went, because me and him have talked about this on Discord a little bit, and he had a lot of thoughts on it as well. So I'll leave you guys to that discussion. Also, not wanting to pile on Dean.
Oh, pile away.
We're all trying to be considerate.
To be piled on.
So don't say that to Atheopagan. Atheopagan, be nice. You behave, and I'll talk to you next time. Okay.
Okay. Bye.
I just realized what that might. That's probably not good to say on the air. So, all right.
Is that a blush that I detect?
Who's been waiting? Let's go with John from Canada, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. John, you're live on the show.
How are you? Hi, Eric. How are you? Long time no hear.
Yeah, definitely. Say hi to Dean.
Hi, Dean. How are you?
I'm doing great, John. If I were any better, I'd be talking to you.
Okay. Before we get started, Eric, you've got the James Bond thing going because the cat's on.
I only if I'm the bad guy. Yeah. I'm just quietly, gently petting the cat and plotting evil things. Yeah. I appreciate you. Go on ahead, you two.
Okay. Dean, is that what your name is?
Yes, that is my name, and I have been called worse.
Okay. And I take I understand you're a Christian apologist.
I have a master's degree in Christian apologetics. I am by no means like an expert. Is how Eric's too charitable to me.
He's more of an expert than you and I, John.
Okay, here's my question. How do you know that God exists?
How do I know that God exists? Well, I reason to the best explanation of the way that reality operates. It says here in the call thing, how do I know that? Am I 100% sure that God exists?
Just to give you a little bit of context, Dean.
Yeah.
John's called in numerous times before on other topics, and has recently called in as somebody who is kind of in between, having, I think, partially, John has a foot out the door, maybe, when it comes to leaving Christianity, and is in a place where he's asking a lot of questions and keeping an open mind. And so, what you do have to say, I can tell you that John will listen. So it's not a gotcha.
No, I got you. Well, John, I'll tackle the second part of your question first, and then I'll give you the reasons why I think Christianity is true, if that's okay.
Okay.
So I think there's a misnomer about epistemology that says unless you can know something to be 100% certain, it's not true unless it is 100% certain. I think there are things even in your own life day to day that you operate on and believe, even though you're not 100% certain. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Well, in science, we're never 100% certain of anything because according to the scientific theory, you can only be 99% certain because you're always learning new things and you have to leave that 1% open in case you learn something new, or else you'll turn.
Sure.
You will shut the door behind you and you won't learn anymore.
Sure. So, and I appreciate that. So I'm just trying to establish right off the bat that in order to hold a belief, you don't have to be 100% certain in order to hold any belief at all.
But it has to be based on something. What do you base your belief on?
No, I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
No, I'm getting there. I'm just saying. I'm saying if I were to say something like the following, and this isn't a gotcha, we're just having a conversation. Are you 100% certain that the sun's going to explode in the next 2 days and our solar system is going to be vaporized? Would you say you're 100% certain that that's not going to happen?
Well, I'm not Jor-El from Superman. I can't predict the end of the Earth. However,
that is yeah, good.
I'm pretty sure it won't happen, but I can't be 100% certain because no one knows. Hold on 1 second, please.
Sure. So you don't walk around in fear every day and cower in your room because you're not 100% certain the sun's not going to explode the next 2 days, right?
It sounds like John needed to step away for just a second.
Yeah, okay. So,
okay.
For instance, you can't be 100% certain that you're going to be alive tomorrow because you could be hit by a car or you could be murdered. But we have to live our lives we have to operate that things are going to happen the way we expect them to.
Great. So what I propose about Christianity and what I propose about other beliefs is that I can believe a particular thing to be true even if I don't have 100% certainty. All right. So I'm not 100% absolutely positively certain that Christianity is true. However, I do believe that Christianity is true beyond what I would call a reasonable doubt. Right?
Okay.
So,
aren't you doing the God of the gaps?
No, I'm not doing God of the gaps because I don't say things like I believe Christianity is true because I read the Bible. I don't say I believe Christianity is true because I went to church when I grew up.
Well,
I don't say
just to
Yep.
clarify, God of the Gaps is the appeal to mystery, right?
Sure.
So
No,
you
I'm
can't
getting to that one.
explain. Okay, go ahead.
I got you. I don't say I can't explain this in the universe, therefore God, right? Where those gaps exist, like Atheopagan was just on, he presented a potential gap, and I didn't automatically say, well, Atheopagan, you're wrong because you know, God exists, God's real, and therefore this problem is solved because of some mystery. Therefore, just have faith, right? I didn't say that to Atheopagan, right? And I wouldn't say that to Atheopagan. He may very well have a good reason for me to give up Christianity. I'm open to that. So what I mean to say is, let me try to get down to brass tacks here. Is that as I look at the way we operate, the way that the world operates, I think the best the best explanation for why anything at all exists would be God. I think when you look at the origin of the universe, I think the best explanation is cause, and the descriptors, the characteristics of that cause is best explained by characteristics that we would associate with God. I think also that the resurrection is an actual historical event. And so given those things, I think they're true. I think they're true justified beliefs given those things. I believe Christianity is true. So there you go.
I'd like to tag in with you on this one. John, a couple of weeks ago when you called and said that you were kind of thinking about, where your beliefs are and how you feel about your view on God, I had told you that what matters to me more than what your conclusion is that you have good reasons for it, whatever your conclusion is, right? I don't need you to be an atheist, and I don't need you to be a Christian. What I want most for you is for you to have good reasons for the things that you believe. And I think Dean would back me up on this. You're right, Dean? And
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that base of reasoning, it would be your epistemic grounding, how you understand the world around you. And when I say that I believe I do not think that a God exists because to my best ability, I have not determined that that's possible or probable.
Okay.
That is my reasoning. Dean has his,
Okay.
but both of us have conclusions that are drawn from our own best epistemic grounding. So we might agree or we might disagree on the conclusion, but we both kind of pride ourselves on at least the process that we used to get here, that it's solid. Right, Dean?
Correctamundo.
Okay, so back to Dean. What do you base that on? Because do you have anything tangible?
John,
Okay,
John, you're coming in really quiet. Could you say that again, but louder?
Okay, this is for Dean. What do you base that on? Do you have anything tangible? You say that Christianity is the best thing, but why Christianity and not any other faith? Plus, you do realize that we have scientific evidence for scientific explanation evidence for the origin of the universe. For instance, the Big Bang. Scientists have determined that. Some of the best scientists have determined that. One of your colleagues, Aaron Roth, studies evolution. He'll testify that we have tons of evidence for that. So why are you ignoring those explanations for a supernatural explanation, and which we don't have any evidence for? And let me finish. And even if it is a supernatural evidence, why are you choosing Christianity and not Islam, Greek, Hindu, Norse, or even make up your own religion? Okay.
So a couple things. Number one, I didn't.
Aaron is on my team, by the way. Aaron, I guess if you were to say colleague, would be on the atheist colleague side.
Right. I'll accept Aaron as a colleague. We could be a colleague even though we disagree. So a couple things, John. Number one, I initially didn't say anything about discounting the Big Bang or evolution. I don't think that those entail necessarily a contradiction to the Christian worldview. So secondly, you asked the question, why not any other religion? And that's where I would posit the resurrection of of Jesus.
But how do you know that happened? How on earth do you know that happened?
John, just hold up. Let me just finish the answer, and then I'll try to give you a concise explanation about why I believe the resurrection is true. And once again, I think if the resurrection is not true, Christianity falls apart. Pick something else, or don't pick anything at all. So you asked about. So I was saying, I think if the resurrection is true, I think that is definitely a differentiator between world religions, simply because if Jesus walked around and said and claimed divine authority, and then that divine authority was vindicated by the resurrection, that I think that separates Jesus from all world religion leaders. So you asked, why do I think that happened? Why do I believe that the resurrection took place? I would say I think it's a historical event based upon a couple of factors. One, I think you have really good early testimony through the writings of Paul. I think there are several things that you need to explain with regards to the rise of Christianity. I think there has to be something that explains the disposition of the disciples prior to Jesus' death and after Jesus' death. I think you have to explain why someone like Paul would leave Judaism, and James, who is a skeptic as well, would leave Judaism for a religion that would essentially, and I'm not wording this properly, but would essentially cost them everything. I think you've got to explain the empty tomb. I think you have to explain the appearances of Jesus to large groups. And I also think that you have good early eyewitness attestation to the resurrection. So that's my rough sketch of why I think the resurrection is true.
But you're basing all that on the assumption that those writings and all those characters were real people and they were telling the truth. Do you have any
sure. Yeah, I do think that they were. I do think Paul was a historical figure.
Okay, but how do you know? Even if he was, how do you know he's telling the truth? You do realize that people write things for their own advantage. What I'm really asking is, do you have something tangible, something you can measure in your hand that you can say, this proves it? I'm sure Eric.
What do you mean? What do you mean by tangible? I mean, if you're asking me, if you're, I mean, I would say that the historical record would be something.
But the historical records can be falsified. Okay, if I told you,
wait, John, what did you just say?
If I told you that I was abducted by aliens, they experimented on me, and I tell a convincing story. Let's say I feel I'm telling the truth. You still wouldn't believe me. You would ask me for something tangible, something that you can test scientifically to verify. Am I correct in that assessment?
Wait, hold up. Time out. Why do you think that if you told me a story about getting abducted by aliens and you had good evidence that I wouldn't believe you?
No, I'm saying that if I don't have evidence, let's say I just came up to you and told you that I was abducted by aliens, would you believe me on face value?
On face value, I would ask, say, hey, describe that to me. What happened?
Okay, let's
on face value,
and
that's not a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing to say, hey, talk to me about this particular abduction so that I can verify whether I believe the story or not. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, but would you believe me? Would you believe that I was actually abducted by aliens? Would you believe me?
On face value, no, I wouldn't.
Okay, so I'm just a way towards your belief. You can tell me all this you want to, but I want something tangible.
What do you mean
sense,
by
right?
tangible? If I gave you a good historical record, would that be good enough for you to believe that the resurrection was a historical event?
Well, I'm sure Eric would agree that that's not good enough because historical records can be falsified.
Well,
People can lie.
I'm,
Plus, you're talking about the supernatural.
yeah,
Supernatural claims
I'm,
require extraordinary beliefs, proof.
yeah, I think that the idea that things can be falsified would be a rough position to take. But I would say that, like, the Iliad is historical. You know, I've used this example before, right? Homer wrote about wars, about people groups that we can point to, right? But that doesn't mean that everything that happened there is true. And I don't need
That's
you.
exactly the case with the
Yeah.
Bible.
And I don't.
It takes place. It takes place in real places, but it doesn't mean that it actually happened, right, Eric?
That's kind of where I'm at on it. Yeah.
It's called
And then
historical
for me to
fiction.
say, you know, for you to prove that it's not correct, you need to explain each of the supernatural events in the Iliad. Would be a weird shifting of the burden of evidence, because the whole question is whether or not it's true to begin with, not whether or not I can disprove your true statement. You know what I mean? Like,
That's what I'm
yeah.
asking Dean.
Yeah. So I guess my question, you said earlier, something like extraordinary claims require
Extraordinary evidence.
extraordinary evidence. I guess that determines on what you count as like extraordinary, because, I mean, you've got, right, throughout Paul's writings, which are actually earlier than the Gospels, there are a multitude of early creeds that are used for him to expound upon a point that predate not just his writings, but also the Gospels. I think one of those would be something like 1 Corinthians 15, Romans chapter 1. And so the question becomes, okay, well, it's not how did the creeds get into the writings? The question becomes, why do those creeds exist at all? Right? That would be something that I would say, you have to have an explanation as to why those things in particular exist, that predate Paul, that predate the Gospels. Too, and I think you're overlooking, these particular eyewitness, the eyewitness documentations recorded in the Gospels. It's even recorded
Look,
in
you
the
can
early oral
have
creeds.
all the eyewitnesses you want. I want something scientific, tangible. Do you have it? That's what I'm asking.
John.
So John, it sounds like what you're saying is, even if I supplied a really good historical case for the resurrection, that wouldn't be good enough for you, because you'd have to have some type of scientific experiment, or I don't even know what you mean by science. How do you run a science experiment when you're dealing with a historical record?
Okay.
Like it sounds like real quick. It sounds like what you're saying is that if there is a historical record of an event and it includes something that's supernatural,
that's right.
It doesn't matter how good the historical record is. It sounds like are you saying you like wouldn't accept it?
That's right. If someone tells me that George Washington, let me finish. If someone told me that George Washington crossed the Delaware, I will believe that on face value. But if someone tells me that George Washington rose from the dead, or made the earth shake all by himself, I would need more than just eyewitness testimony. Don't you agree, Dean? And Eric?
So I think the eyewitness testimony is a very silly thing. There is no eyewitness testimony, and to say there is extraordinarily charitable. But regardless, I do want to. I think I'm kind of disagreeing partially with both of you on multiple points. Dean, obviously, I disagree with you on the eyewitness testimony piece,
sure.
And on where the burden lies. And I definitely would push back on the historical record because, again, I can point to lots of historical fiction that was important and that is well, grounded in when and where it was and why it was important. And so pointing to those things, to say, why does that fiction exist? Because it was written. But on the other side of it, John, I would love for you to think of what kind of scientific experiment you could do that would be sufficient, because the way that we treat historical things, I think that I want to give you two resources, John.
Yes.
One of them is Religion for Breakfast. The other is Digital Hammurabi. And what you have is historians and archaeologists who specialize in that area at that time, and listening to experts, no matter what their faith background is, on what their standards are for evidence and how they determine those things can really help give you the tools, because it is a different kind of tool set to go over historical things. So I would definitely look to what the people who do that for a living require.
Religion for Breakfast? Is that what it's called?
Religion for Breakfast, and the other one is called Digital Hammurabi.
Okay, but here's my contention.
They're actually collaborating right now. I believe the course might still be open for people to join, but they are trying to teach everyone who wants to learn.
Well,
Aramaic.
I'm not taking any courses. But what I'm really trying to say is this: if you're going to claim a supernatural event, you need to be able to prove it scientifically, even to a certain degree. If we just say, take this person's word for it, take my word for it, that's not good enough. For instance,
I think you're caricaturing the argument, John. I'm not saying just because it's written, take its word for it. I'm not saying that at all.
Well,
I wouldn't say that about it. I wouldn't say that about anything.
Give me tangible proof. That's what I'm asking for. Tangible proof.
So, but you can't. So the point would be, John, when you're dealing with a historical record, you can't run a scientific experiment to show that historical event took place. That's like saying, okay, even something that's similar, right? I would ask you, okay, so John, run a scientific experiment that proves that George Washington crossed the Delaware or that Caesar crossed the Rubicon. Give me a scientific experiment that shows that took place historically. It seems like you've got a category error going on here. You're trying to take that which is in history.
But for those claims,
John,
those
stop.
claims are not supernatural.
John, I'm going to mute you. John, you couldn't run a scientific experiment that shows a guy in history actually crossed the Delaware. You couldn't run a scientific experiment that would show that Caesar crossed the Rubicon. The only thing that you would have is the historical record. And you would have to ask the question, is this particular event, based upon the evidence of the historical record, more likely true or false? So you got a category error going on. You're trying to take that which is in history and put it into a Bunsen burner or a beaker and run a scientific experiment. And those two categories are completely separate and apart from one another.
Okay, but in terms of crossing the Delaware, we're not talking about the supernatural. We are talking about.
It doesn't matter what you're talking about, John. It doesn't matter if you're talking about the supernatural or the Delaware or the Rubicon or Normandy. There's nothing a scientific experiment can show that actually happened in history. You could show that it's possible to take place. You could line up a bunch of people in a boat in the winter in Delaware and say, hey, can you cross the Delaware River when it's 2 degrees outside? And you could say, well, yeah, we can get in a boat and we can cross the Delaware. And we could say, oh, well, it's possible for that to happen. And that raises the probability that some guy named George Washington did it. Mm-hmm. Right. You can do that.
Yeah, no, you got it.
Sure.
And that's perfect. So the next step is, how possible is it for someone to rise from the dead? and then we can determine how
Right.
probable it is.
Sure. And where you would go with that is you would say, okay, what is the probability of somebody rising from the dead given this particular historical data point? And I think to John's question, whether or not John thinks that the supernatural is possible given God's existence, right? So there's these conditions and the variables that you take into consideration when you're looking at these particular things. And John, it doesn't matter how many times John says, give me something tangible. You're never going to be able to run a scientific experiment to show that something in history actually happened.
Hey, John?
Yes?
I think that you kicked off a really, really awesome conversation. And I'm really happy that you called in. I'd love to take the baton from here. That way we can wrap in, and try to get one more call in before the end of the show. But I don't want you to feel like I just kind of cut you out. So I'd love for you two to talk to each other just a bit more, see where we can wrap things up for today, and then
Sure.
We'll move on.
Okay, Dean, you just finished saying that you can't run a scientific experiment, and you're willing to base your entire life based on this belief. But I want to ask this one question. What if you're wrong?
Oh, if I'm wrong, then I'll give up Christianity. That's never been an issue for me. If I'm wrong and it's shown to be wrong, I'll give up Christianity. My question would be, you're agnostic, and my question would be, what if you were wrong about asking a scientific question in a historical category?
Well, all I gotta say is that if God decides to send me to hell for being curious, that means he's a God that wasn't interested in me using my mind. He was interested in having a follower, and I don't know if I can follow someone like that. But anyway, I'm glad we had this conversation. Have a good day, gentlemen.
John,
see you later, Dean, and you too, Eric.
Take care. I know John does that at the very end. He'll throw in a total other thing, and you're like, wait, that's a whole thing to jump in on. And like, John has done it to me too.
I'm not worried about it. It's all good.
So I do just like, my inner contrarian just needs to nitpick a little bit.
Sure, nitpick away, man.
Okay, so is it impossible to determine that whether or not the Shroud of Turin was the burial shroud of Jesus?
Is it impossible to determine that?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah? Because
I'm not a Shroud of Turin guy.
Because there's methodology to find out how old that shroud is, and there's like looking at the technology at the time, how a thing is made. We can use scientific methodology to answer historic questions, just not all of them. And so I do just want to like clarify that you can use scientific methodology to determine historic questions.
No, I'm not
everything.
Okay, I'm going to push back on this real quick. I'm not saying that you couldn't use scientific technology to show that the Shroud of Turin was a burial shroud of somebody, but there's no scientific experiment that you can run that's going to show you that that was actually the burial shroud of Jesus of Nazareth after his crucifixion.
So
I just think that anybody that would, I'm going to be bold and blunt here, and if people want to watch the show and you're Christian and you think that I'm wrong here, wow, I almost feel like I'm an atheist. Then just go ahead and say, give me the evidence that shroud is the burial shroud of Jesus of Nazareth from 2,000 years ago. I think personally, the only thing you're going to be able to show is that it was a burial shroud of somebody during that time. That's it.
Actually, the reason it was debunked is because it was the burial shroud of somebody way later. Like, it is way too recent of a thing to have been there at the time. So that's the piece there. But no, I'm willing to, even if we didn't have that, the best you're going to get is that is a burial shroud. But unless we know what Jesus's DNA is, or unless you're Ron Wyatt. Do you remember Ron Wyatt?
I have no idea who that is.
Oh my God. Are you serious?
I have no clue who that is.
I guarantee you do. Okay,
I don't.
Okay, hold on. Have you heard they found chariot wheels at the bottom of the Dead Sea?
I've heard that. I've never known that was the guy that did that.
Or what was it? That they found Sodom and Gomorrah.
I mean, I've heard all these things. I've just never put a name to it.
That's Ron
Sorry.
Wyatt.
Oh, okay.
He was bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. And he was vile in some of the worst ways. He's the guy that I called you because you've got the military history. I think that he's stolen valor as well. Just to like add on to the shit person that he was. He's dead now. I'm sad that we don't get to call him a piece of shit to his face. But
wow, Eric.
Dude, it is such a fun tangent. I would love to go on sometime. Ron Wyatt absolutely did. It's not good. It's not good. Anyway, we'll get into that another day. The only reason I say that is Ron Wyatt said that he found the blood of Jesus and that he had it DNA tested, and that it had half the chromosomes of blood because there's only the father. You know, basically, he was saying that you can tell that it's angelic DNA, when the fact is that that number of chromosomes means that Jesus wasn't a human. It was a tomato, I guess, or one of the other things that have that number of, like, it's wild. It's absolutely wild. But this guy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I guess, real quick, I guess what I mean to say is that if I were to take a metal detector out and you were to say, hey, use this metal detector and find plastic. I mean, you're not going to be able to use a metal detector to find plastic. So all you can do is, and I'm liking that similarly to John's question about give me some scientific proof or scientific evidence that a supernatural thing took place, right? Well, what I mean to say is that you're not going to be able to run a scientific experiment to show that a particular supernatural event took place. What you're going to have to do is you're going to look at the historical record. I guess what I'm trying to say, look at the historical record and say, based upon the historical record, is this particular event more likely true than false? So, I guess that's what I mean to say and push back on John a little bit. And I'm going to do that now that he's obviously not here to defend himself.
John's pretty gracious with that. And I absolutely agree with you. I think that you should look at the record and come to the best conclusion you can about whether or not it happened. Dean, you and I just disagree on what that conclusion is.
No, I know.
But Ben has been waiting for almost an hour.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can grab Ben and say hi for a minute. Hey, Ben.
Hey, hi guys. Eric, hey. Dean.
Hello.
Ben, what is going on?
Well, something I've always kind of wondered about is what people mean when they use the word true to describe an idea. Because I kind of wonder if sometimes people are talking past each other because they're not exactly talking about the same thing. So I guess I'm kind of wondering, what do you mean when you say that the idea of a God or Jesus resurrecting is true, contrasted with, say, scientific truths or something, scientific ideas?
Yeah. So what I mean by true in general is that something is true if it corresponds to the way that reality actually works, if that makes sense. It's called the correspondence theory of truth. There's two other theories. One would be the coherence theory of truth, and the other one would be the pragmatic theory of truth, often known as pragmatism. So,
and to also jump in, I'm with Dean. I also subscribe to the correspondence theory of truth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
there's a reality out there, and your ideas appear to conform to that reality.
Well, they correspond to that.
Yeah,
they correspond.
We can check to see how we can check to see what our idea of the world is, and we can compare it to the world and see whether or not they line up.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. And what's the pragmatic one? Because that sounds like it might be more how I think of things.
Sure. So the two other ones, I'll just dive into them if Eric, you're okay with me diving into those.
Dude, I think you've got this one handled. You know what? I'm going to give you the one up.
No, you're good.
Oh
So
no, I'm doing it. Look at this. Look at this. Oh, all right.
nice, nice. So Ben, the pragmatic theory of truth in its simplest form is basically saying, if it works for me, it's true. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Coherence theory says, that it is internally consistent, therefore it's true. So, for instance, one could say, and just in a bigger way, the pragmatic theory of truth would say something like, Christianity works for me. It gives me a warm and fuzzy. It drives me to think of myself better mentally. And so because it does that for me, therefore it's true.
Oh, I get to take all of that out of context. I can take that from beginning to end and just perfectly. Anyway, go ahead.
So coherence theory of truth would say something like, the story of Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling's novels is internally consistent. Therefore, Harry Potter is an actual person of history.
Oh, wow.
Or that I believe that there's a place called Hogwarts because there's nothing internally inconsistent or incoherent about the story of Harry Potter.
So I think that they do hold more weight than what Dean's giving. So
well, I'm just simplifying it as much as possible. I'm not trying to destroy them because I think they both play a part in. They actually both play a part in correspondence theory as well.
Yeah, the pragmatic theory of truth, from what I understand, it does technically. You're right. It's true because it's most useful. But also, if you were to run an investigation, on something, a homicide, the most useful things are what are creating a web of knowledge, and it's that kind of web that you're using to bounce things off of. And so the truth of one thing is kind of contingent on the truth of another thing, and they kind of both are
web of
propping
belief,
each other up. Yep. And that's pragmatic. Or I just mixed them all together. Ben, I just made it worse. Don't listen to me. I made things worse. I highly suggest you look into all three, though, because they're fun. But the two of you go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the third one almost sounds like verisimilitude, which is, a good writer can achieve with a complete work of fiction. And I almost think I subscribe to the reverse of what you were saying, Eric, about pragmatism. It's like, I think true ideas have the most utility because they're the ones that successfully predict cause and effect. So you can pick them up and use them like a tool. I work in engineering, so I have to use those ideas all the time.
I think that somebody who subscribed to the pragmatic theory of truth would agree with you.
Mm-hmm. So it's like I need ideas that fit the correspondence theory so that I can do useful work with them.
Are you asking for an example?
Well, I guess I was just giving an example. Like that's like my approach, and I guess I'm curious. Like if you were to drill down into one of your theistic beliefs,
sure,
how would you establish the truth of it, and what would you mean when you said that idea is true?
Oh, yeah, God, that's such a good question. Why?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say with regards to a theistic belief that I have is God. Let me think of an example. So I would say let's just stay on the resurrection. I believe that the resurrection is true because it corresponds to the way things are in reality, right? That doesn't necessarily mean just in my day-to-day experience, but in the totality of reality, which means God exists, miracles are possible, Jesus was a historical figure, He died by the hands of Pontius Pilate. He was put in a tomb, and then shortly after that tomb, historically speaking, that tomb was empty, and the best explanation of that is the resurrection. I don't know if that's an example that you're looking for. If it's not, clarify for me.
Yeah, I think like, any one of those points you brought up could be dug into a lot, like dug into deeper
Sure.
to see, how well it comports with what we observe about reality.
Mm-hmm.
Resurrection isn't a thing that happens every day. So
sure.
And
sure.
And like John brought up, there's a lot of this is coming from books that people wrote, and if you've read nonfiction books written in the modern era, they often contain a lot of fiction.
Sure. I mean, I don't deny that. Would you say modern fiction books include a lot of what?
modern nonfiction books.
Oh, okay. I thought you said a lot of fiction books include a lot of fiction. I was like, wait, yes,
sorry.
they do.
No,
my bad. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying there as far as all that jazz. I guess my question is, like, what specific track do you want me to go down?
Well, would I be correct in assuming that the idea of Jesus resurrecting is one of the more powerful ideas in your belief? Because if that didn't happen, then he was just some guy, right?
Sure.
And
agreed.
So, like, how do you resolve that idea with the fact that we don't observe resurrection happening?
Sure.
Test it out ourselves today.
Yeah. So, well, because I don't think that something has to happen consistently over the course of a day or history for it to be true, right?
Yeah, it's possible. It's just, sure. It's like we have to weigh what we see as credible or not. Yeah.
So I guess my point would be, and I don't know what you think about origin of the universe or anything like that, but we don't see universes coming into being on a day-to-day basis, but nobody's there to see the universe come into being, but it did. So I mean, it's a one-time historical event, but we don't deny it just because we don't see it happening all the time.
Yeah, I mean, part of that is that we are in a universe, and it's kind of hard to see outside of one, like it used to be hard to see outside of the Earth until we got better telescopes.
Well, I don't know if outside of the universe is even a concept that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe mathematically, I don't know.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sorry, I just wanted to. You two go ahead. We got a little bit of time left.
I got you. I guess my point there, Ben, I think you've made a right assessment there. It would be that just because something doesn't happen on a repeated basis throughout history doesn't mean that it's not true. Or that's not.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
Yeah. So
it's just,
I'd say the way that I look at that is it's not just like some random guy. I mean, I don't know. I don't know where you stand on historical Jesus stuff. I mean, do you think Jesus was a historical figure?
Well, I think history itself. Now, I'm sure historians do an enormously good job trying to piece together what could be true or false. But, I think it's kind of a heat map of how good their evidence is. So I think just a lot of written history could be not true. And I mean, honestly, I think I'm kind of split on the Jesus thing. Like, there's kind of a dearth of, from what I've heard, there's a dearth of evidence of the time of the written from the time period he actually lived. Like, a lot of it is afterwards. So, there's a lot of room to paint with some creative writing there.
Sure. No, I understand your spot. I guess I'm lost on where we're going. I guess, the way that I would say, yeah, I would agree. What you originally said is that a big like belief in my quote web of belief, and I would say, yeah, it is a big belief. And how do I reconcile with that we don't see people resurrecting all the time? Is that
Yeah.
yeah?
Like,
So
I think
I would say the way that I reconcile that is the way that I reconcile that would be that I think miracles are possible even if they are infrequent.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting because like I know I've heard about there's like these two schools of thought in medicine. There's evidence-based medicine, and more recently there's science-based medicine, where it's possible if you have a bunch of evidence that is perhaps skewed or biased in some way, you could reach unscientific conclusions about how medicine works. Whereas with science-based medicine, they have that body of data, but they're also trying to tie the effects they observe with some principle. So they're not just I don't know,
shooting
basing it off of what happened.
Yeah.
I guess that's how I look at things like a resurrection. It's like, is there a principle behind this that could be tied to it? And we don't see one currently.
What do you mean by we don't see one currently? What do you mean?
Well, I'm just saying we don't see people coming back to life, and we don't see a mechanism by which people can rise from being that dead. I mean, you can be mostly you can be mostly dead and brought back, like Princess
So
Bride.
if it's more probable than not that God exists, would that be a mechanism by which people could come back from the dead?
I mean, if that was, if we observed a God and it had that capability, we'd probably see it more often.
And I'm gonna throw this out as a teaser. I don't think I've ever asked anybody this before. Would I have to observe a particular agent to come to the conclusion that an agent exists?
I think you could definitely. I do find it plausible that you could deduce the existence of an agent with, not direct observation of that agent, but evidence of it. Yeah, I think that's entirely possible.
Right.
So I think,
yeah,
I think it's entirely possible a God could exist. I just haven't seen convincing evidence or science to back it up.
And this is where Eric knows that I'm going.
I have so many thoughts.
I know.
Let's give it another few minutes, and then we got to wrap up.
No, I got you. So I would say you're right to conclude that you don't have to see an agent in order to believe that an agent exists. That's what happens in murder trials, right? Cold cases. All right. I think that's not a 1-for-1. I'm not saying it's a 1-for-1. I'm just saying agency. I'm not saying supernatural agency. So I guess my other question, and man, we need to wrap up soon, but I guess, Ben, this is the question I ask all my atheist friends. What would convince you?
Well, how certain artifacts that humans have made, you can see tool marks and they might inscribe their initials on it or something.
Sure.
That could certainly be strong evidence of an agent who made that thing. I think I've read science fiction books where people found like a message embedded in the number pi. It's like, well, that's clearly somebody clearly put that there. Hard to ascertain that, but I haven't seen that. And like, it's funny because like made things that we know were made where we saw a person do it or clearly have a record of that, they're usually pretty simple, whereas the sort of the things that were kind of churned out of thermodynamics by the universe are usually like incredibly complex because they're more complex than a person would design, which is interesting.
I think
so yeah, I mean, if I saw some tool marks in the cosmos, then
Man, Ben, I want to talk to you so much more, just because I think there are some tool marks in your life. But no, I appreciate the question. I think it's a good question, and I appreciate your demeanor throughout the call, man. Sounds like you're a genuine listener.
Yeah, I try to. Yeah, hey, thanks a lot for going down those rabbit holes with me.
Hey, no problem, man. Anytime. Eric knows why I'm laughing.
Yeah, because I'm biting my
I can
tongue.
see it on his face. I can just see it on his face. He's like,
Yeah, and the thing is, part of the reason that I want to have you on is because I want the viewer to be challenged as well. Right now, we're in a space where there's, this is a smaller group that's watching this and taking part, which means that they can interact with you in a more real way. And yeah, if I jumped on everything, then they wouldn't have those opportunities. That said, I do have thoughts. I think that if you were to ask people who were talking about the Big Bang Theory, they would not say that is the beginning of the universe. They could say maybe, but because they don't have evidence of how an instantiation of a universe could take place, for them to say that is the origin of a universe, they don't say that. And so to say that we have evidence of that happening once, no, we don't. And people don't point to that as evidence. And even if they did, it would be a theory. And I don't think that you're hanging your hat on the theory of Jesus doing it. You've got more confidence than that, which would mean that it would be a different category. That said,
wait, what do you mean? Hold up. What do you mean?
Sure. So, do you hope that Jesus existed, or are you convinced of the truth that Jesus existed?
Yeah, I believe that he existed. I think he's a historical figure.
I mean, sure. So is Zeus. So is Pharaoh. Like, a historical figure doesn't mean that it existed in reality. It could also mean that it was.
Oh, I think Jesus existed in reality for sure.
There we go. Okay. The historical figure has a much lower bar of evidence there. So yeah, that and then also the tool marks bit. Humans are wonderful at misattributing cause. Ron Wyatt, the person I brought up earlier, was really, really good at that. He was really good at there's video of him pointing at mountains where the water has kind of eroded parts of the mountain, and he goes, oh, that's a city. You could see right there's windows there and doors, and he's just like, his mind is drawing shapes on the natural landscape that are just not consistent with reality at all, because he doesn't understand how geography works, which is also the basis of the, they found the Ark, right? They found Mount Ararat, like it's there. Yeah, that's not true. Ron Wyatt did that because he doesn't know how archaeology works, or geology. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying that the example, that Ron Wyatt was at is not real.
No, I see.
And so, like, because we're so good at misattributing cause to things, we have lots of evidence of people ascribing agency to natural things. And because of that, I would take anything, when we're trying to determine agency, with a really big grain of salt, and understand that that's not, Anyway, I said my piece. Dean, when are you going to be on next?
Whatever the 4th Sunday of May is.
All right, let's take a look here.
Whenever that be.
You're going to be on May 25th.
Dub.
For people who are watching and they did not see Dean challenged that way, and Dean, get me some Christian callers. You're getting a lot here.
That's fine. I'll do what I can. I'll get all my my zealots, dare I say.
Maybe not zealots. Maybe you can keep the zealots to yourself. That's fine. That's fine.
I don't know. I'll go look at some rocks and see if Darth Dawkins is around here anywhere,
Oh God.
or any of his dudes.
Okay, Dean.
Boy, that's just
Okay.
a callback. It's just a callback.
I know. I got you.
So yeah. What was that one guy? He was Brazilian that always used to call in. Started with like a O or something like that.
Tangelo.
Yeah,
He's
get
banned
him
on
in here.
Everything. He's banned on everything. The reason
he's banned on everything.
Well, the reason is because he spams massive walls of text. Right, he just copy pastas like crazy everywhere. It's just difficult.
Copy pastas. I've never heard of that before.
No,
copy pasta. Never heard of it before.
Copy pasta is a thing.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so
yeah.
No, real quick. I just want to say thank you for always being Semper Gumby with me. I know that Sundays are easy for a lot of people, and they can be kind of hectic for me, but I really do appreciate the grace that you show me week in and week out. And thanks. And I want to thank all the callers. I mean, I know
we're not done
I
yet.
really do appreciate it.
We do.
I know.
Really
I'm
quickly.
just saying.
Yeah.
I just feel this moment of
your heart is swelling.
Yeah. I mean, this is so cool because I mean, the most difficult call we had today was John, and he wasn't all that difficult. Nobody was like crushing me or anything like that.
I was impressed with John today. Yeah, really, I was impressed.
So yeah, I just want to say thanks, man. I appreciate it. A moment of, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for. A moment of me catching, me caught up in my feels.
I'm glad. Also, Sempre Gumby. I don't know what that
Sempre
means.
Gumby. Always flexible.
Always Gumby.
Is always flexible is what we used to say in the Marine Corps.
Nice.
Always flexible. So yeah.
All right. So this is the part where I read the super chats, because if y'all want to make sure that what you want to say is read out loud, this is how you do it. Pop that in a super chat and we'll make sure that we read it at the end of every episode. Also, if you want to support the show, there's a really big expense coming up that's annual for the show. So if you do want to support it, go to patreon.com/skepticgeneration. That's patreon.com/skepticgeneration. Everything goes into making sure that this show can happen, and it is churning week to week, month to month. And the only reason it's happening is because of you. If you want to support the show and you can't do that, totally understood. Go hit the like button, hit subscribe, get this out there. That way more people can be a part of the conversation. All right, let's read some super chats. My Unfinished Journey sent $2.22 and said, "Hail Nero, Eric, Dean, and birthdays." The reason we're hailing birthdays is because two of our longtime volunteers are celebrating their birthdays today. And so I absolutely, happy birthday. Caitlin and Kristen are both celebrating their birthdays this weekend. I know you know Kristen. But happy birthday, you guys. Thompson412 sent $5 and says, "John never said anything about scientific experiments. Why did you keep trying to deflect instead of offering any of the historical record you claimed?"
Wow. Never. He said scientific proof. I guess maybe he doesn't mean experiments. So yeah, if I misspoke there, I will double back next time I'm on. I'll go back and listen, and if I'm wrong, I'll readdress the question. So yeah.
Atlas Dye sent $20. Thank you, Atlas, and says, "I've listened to John's calls into atheist and skeptic shows for years. Interesting and bumpy road. I also really enjoy the entertainment value and his growth over time. Your willingness and patience has been key, Eric. Much love." Oh, thank you. Much love back. It's in the heart, but I actually have a cat that has fallen asleep in my lap and has begun snoring.
Nice.
Yeah. Thank you. And then Coach Frankie sent $20 as well. Thank you, Coach Frankie, and says, "Love the show. Thanks, Eric and Dean." All right. Here's the part. I know that you've done this once. Do you remember how to close out the show?
This is Skeptic Generation, and we need to talk.
Almost. I'm Eric Murphy.
I'm Dean Meadows.
This is Skeptic Generation. We're glad we had this talk.
And we need to talk. What is it?
We're glad we had this talk.
Oh, we're glad we had this talk.
We'll fix it in
okay, we'll
post.
try it. We'll try it one more time.
Okay,
All right?
let's do it. Ready? I'm Eric Murphy.
I'm Dean Meadows.
This is Skeptic Generation.
and we're glad we had this talk.
Perfect.